This is part 3 in this week's unit about STI prevention and pregnancy prevention. And I wanted this question of, is emergency contraception the same thing as abortion, to be its own video? Because it is always so surprising to me how many people still have this belief. I was actually talking to a friend of mine the other day that she and her husband had had an incident. There was a failure of sorts, and I had mentioned just go get EC, and that was, I can't. That would be like having an abortion. I can't do that. And this is a very, very intelligent, very highly educated woman. So this is still such a common misbelief, partially because of how much protest there was over EC when it was becoming more readily available, and especially when it became available without a prescription. So I want to clear this up a little bit. So is emergency contraception the same thing as abortion? Scientifically, no. The reason I specify scientifically, and please hear me that I'm not saying this disrespectfully whatsoever. If someone is coming from a religious perspective of believing that interfering with the potential for life, such as religions who don't believe that hormonal contraception is something that should be used at all, okay? If someone is coming from a religious perspective that believes that any sort of hormonal intervention is interfering with the potential for life and therefore should be seen as the same way as abortion, that is a very different conversation that we're having, because then we're getting into issues of the ethics of your worldviews and what is philosophically shaping your definition of life and this and that. And that is very different from a scientific answer of, within the body, is this preventing pregnancy or is this ending pregnancy? So that's why I'm specifying scientifically it means no, because if this is being approached from a religious perspective, this is a different conversation that we're having. And we're going to talk a little bit later this semester about religious beliefs that shape sexual behaviors. So scientifically, no. And I'm going to explain why. And I don't have a bunch of charts and graphs and stuff, so you're just going to have to listen to me talk. So, as hopefully by this point everybody is aware of, the way the pregnancy occurs, there is ejaculation inside the vaginal canal. The sperm swims up through the cervix. Ovulation has happened. An egg has been released. There's an egg in the fallopian tube. At some point in that midpoint, sperm and egg meet. Sperm fertilizes egg. You now have a fertilized egg. That egg can implant into the uterine lining, and that is what then grows into an embryo, into a fetus, and assuming that there's no miscarriage, is then born. Okay. Typically, we refer to an abortion as there's two different points. The most conservative of those is that if the egg has been fertilized, even if it has not implanted into the uterine wall, you still have a fertilized egg. So you still have potential for life. And if you have prevented it from implanting, that would be considered an abortion. Okay. The second perspective is, if you have a fertilized egg that has implanted into the uterine wall and you intentionally do something that causes that to be detached, removed from the uterine wall, therefore ending potential for life, that is considered an abortion. And I'm saying potential for life, not to take away the significance of life of an embryo or fetus, but simply to say it being able to live on its own, being able to live outside of the host body on its own. I'm trying to be very careful with my language so as not to offend. So that's what we typically consider an abortion, is you've had a fertilized egg, usually implanted, and something that has happened that has ended that situation, and this no longer has the potential to be a born, fully living, outside the body human baby. So what does emergency contraception do, and why is this different? What emergency contraception does is that it's a pill that's taken after unprotected sex. The sooner the better, because of the way it works. First and foremost, it prevents ovulation. So if you are in a period in your cycle leading up to ovulation and you take it, it's going to prevent ovulation from happening. However, if you've already ovulated, it's not going to undo that. The hormonal profile can't like kill the egg. It's if ovulation has happened, that's a separate consideration, and we'll get to that in a second. But its first mechanism of action is it prevents the ovum from releasing an egg. It prevents ovulation, or the ovary. I'm sorry, it prevents the ovary from releasing an egg. So it prevents ovulation, and that's why the sooner the better, right? Because if you have unprotected sex on a Monday night and you are predicted to ovulate on Wednesday, that needs to be in your system as soon as possible to prevent that ovulation from occurring, because sperm can live inside the body for a bit. Okay. So it prevents ovulation from occurring. It also thickens the cervical and the vaginal fluids to inhibit sperm motility. All right. Think like swimming through jello. In fact, a lot of individuals report after taking emergency contraception that a lot of their fluids, like the vaginal discharge and the cervical mucus, has like a very thick, almost gelatin-like texture to it. It makes it very, very thick. And what that does is it inhibits sperm motility. And the benefit of that is if ovulation occurred, right? Like say you ovulated Monday morning and you had unprotected sex Monday night. So ovulation has already occurred. Again, take it as soon as you possibly can, because it takes the sperm a bit to get to the egg, right? This isn't something that happens in an hour. That's a bit of a journey. It takes a little bit to get there. And so by thickening up those fluids, the sperm is not able to swim through it. So the sperm is not able to get to the egg. So even if that egg is already there, it blocks that pathway. And so it cannot get to it. It cannot fertilize it. And this is why it's not abortion, because it's not doing anything to a fertilized egg. It's not getting rid of a fertilized egg. It's preventing, one, hopefully, best case scenario, it's preventing an egg from existing that month. It's blocking ovulation. But if an egg does exist already, it's blocking the sperm from being able to fertilize an egg. And so that is why it is not the same thing as abortion. Again, ASAP is always best. You can actually get it just over the counter at Price Cutter at Walgreens. You don't need a prescription. You don't need it anything. There are a lot of individuals who just keep it on hand in case they need it, which I think is a great idea, and I would highly recommend if you're sexually active. But the sooner you take it, the better. And it can be effective for up to 5 days. The reason of up to 5 days is if you're going to get pregnant, you've probably already gotten pregnant within 5 days of unprotected sex. That's the max out of how long sperm are able to live in the body on their journey to an egg. So if fertilization hasn't happened after 5 days, it's probably not going to. So yeah, ASAP to up to 5 days, but the sooner the better. So that is just kind of an overview of emergency contraception and how it works, and also why it is not the same thing as abortion. The last piece of the series for the module this week is going to be on some of the psychological and partner communication elements of contraception and STI prevention.